Have you ever stayed up all night wondering why she didn't reply, even though she saw your message hours ago? Have you ever walked away from a conversation and then, 5 minutes later, your brain starts replaying every single thing you said and what you should have said better? Have you ever felt your chest tighten because someone smirked at you in a way that made you feel small, and for some reason, you can't stop thinking about it? That wasn't just a random moment. That was a test. A game you didn't know you were playing until you were already losing. See, most people think power is loud. It yells, it defends itself, it fights back. But the people who understand emotional warfare, they know better. They don't need to raise their voice. They just need to provoke yours. Because the second you react, they've won. They got to you. They pierced your armor. They saw you flinch. And now, you're no longer in control. They are. That's how they win arguments without speaking. That's how they manipulate without touching. That's how they dominate, by controlling the one thing you didn't think was up for grabs, your state of mind. And you know what's worse, you let them. Not because you're weak, but because you were taught that reacting is being real, that showing emotion is honest, that silence is weakness. And that's where the lie began. Because silence, real silence, the kind built from discipline, from inner stillness, from not needing to respond just because someone wants you to. That silence is terrifying to people who rely on chaos to feel powerful. They wanted you to explode. They wanted you to defend yourself. They wanted you to scream, to cry, to type a long paragraph they could screenshot and send to their friends. But when you stayed still, when you didn't react, when you looked back with nothing but calm in your eyes, suddenly they started to panic, because now they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know where you stand. And worst of all, they no longer know if they have any power over you at all. That's the shift. That's the Stoic advantage. And it doesn't begin when you're already calm. It begins when someone tries to drag you into their storm and you refuse to leave your peace. Today, I'm going to show you how to do that. Not just once, but every single time. I'm going to give you the exact mindset that makes you untouchable, not because you're heartless, but because you've finally stopped handing your emotional power to people who never earned it. You're going to learn how to stay calm in the face of disrespect, how to protect your inner world without needing to explain it, and how to watch people unravel in your silence while you remain unmoved. But I warn you, once you master this, you won't be like most men anymore. You won't beg for closure. You won't argue to be understood. You won't react just because someone is trying to bait you. And that shift, it will make certain people uncomfortable. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become free. And when you're free, when no one can trigger you anymore, that's when the real panic begins. Not in you, in them. Some people don't actually want to hurt you. They want to see if they still can. Let that sink in. The silence wasn't random. The sarcasm wasn't a joke. That small delay in their response, that strange coldness in their tone, that time they suddenly forgot your birthday or mentioned your biggest insecurity in passing. Those weren't accidents. They were probes, emotional tests, designed not to destroy you, but to expose you. To see if you're still the same person who flinches, explains, apologizes, or explodes. They're not trying to break you. They're trying to measure how far they can push before you break yourself. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people feed off your reaction. Your emotional pain is their proof of control. When they can trigger you, they feel validated, seen, powerful. That's why some women will pull away just to see if you chase. That's why some friends will belittle you publicly and then laugh it off like it was just a joke. That's why certain people only reach out when they know you're starting to move on. Not because they miss you, but because they want to reset the power balance. It's not connection they want, it's leverage. And if you don't understand that game, you will spend your life being played over and over by people who smile while pulling your strings, and you'll justify it. They're just going through something. Maybe I was too sensitive. I don't want to overreact. But deep down, you know something was off. Something was intentional. Something felt calculated, because it was. And your anger, your overthinking, your obsessive need for closure, for clarity, for fairness. That's the win they were waiting for. That's the proof you still belong to their emotional ecosystem, but not anymore. Because once you recognize the pattern, the emotional bait, the passive-aggressive tone, the fake apologies, the strategic distance, you stop playing. You stop chasing clarity from people who create confusion on purpose. You stop reacting to people who know exactly which button to press. And when you stop reacting, something wild happens. They get louder, angrier, more dramatic. They start blaming you for being distant. They say, "You've changed." They say, "You're being cold." But what they're really saying is, "Why doesn't this work on you anymore?" That's when you know you've broken the cycle. The Stoics understood this long before psychology gave it a name. Marcus Aurelius wasn't teaching philosophy to sound wise. He was training himself not to be pulled by people who hadn't mastered themselves. When he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wasn't talking about abstract ideas. He was talking about that exact moment when someone tries to pull you into their emotional chaos, and you choose stillness instead. Because your peace isn't just your escape, it's your shield. It's what makes you unpredictable in a world where everyone is used to watching each other overreact. When they can't push your buttons, they lose their strategy. When you don't explain, they lose their grip. When you don't defend, they lose their illusion of control. And when you say nothing, their minds fill in the silence with every guilty thought they've ever suppressed. So the next time someone disrespects you in a subtle way, pause, don't explain, don't defend, don't react, because their goal isn't the argument, it's the disturbance. Don't give them that win. Let them sit with your silence. Let them feel the power of a man who no longer needs to make noise to feel heard. Because silence doesn't just protect your peace. It makes them question everything they thought they understood about how to control you. There's a reason people get uncomfortable when you don't explain yourself. It's because they're used to being able to pull you into defense mode. They say something sharp, and they expect you to flinch. They act distant, and they expect you to ask what's wrong. They ignore you, and they expect you to lean in harder. And when you don't, when you stay still, unmoved, unbothered, they panic. Because silence forces them to face something they've spent their whole life avoiding, themselves. You see, when you react, you give them an escape. You become the problem. You become the one who's too emotional, too sensitive, too intense. But when you say nothing, they're left alone with their own actions. And for most people, that's unbearable. So they'll push harder. They'll accuse you of shutting down. They'll twist the story to make you look like the bad guy. They'll say you don't care. But here's the truth. When you stop explaining, you stop enabling, you stop giving energy to narratives that were never yours to carry. The Stoic understands this. He doesn't respond to bait. He doesn't argue with chaos. He knows that some people don't want resolution. They want reaction. They want to drag you into the mud so they can feel clean standing next to you. But when you stay above it, not arrogantly, but firmly, they lose the only thing they ever had over you, your emotional accessibility. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. You don't owe anyone a reaction just because they've been conditioned to expect one. Your silence is not weakness. It's precision. It's clarity. It's your refusal to fight battles that no longer deserve your presence. And that refusal, that terrifies them. Because now they can't predict you. They can't manipulate you. They can't feed off your energy. Now, they have to sit with their own behavior. And guess what it means that you didn't respond? Now, they're the ones replaying the moment over and over in their head. Now, they're wondering, did I go too far? Did I lose him? Why is he so calm? And that discomfort they feel, that's the storm they used to put you through. Now it's theirs to weather. You've finally flipped the dynamic. And here's the best part. You didn't have to yell, cry, or explain a thing. You just had to stay silent long enough for the truth to echo back to them. This is what the Stoics meant when they said, "Let your actions speak." But sometimes, your most powerful action is no action at all. Just presence, just composure, just unshakable calm. Because people are used to noise. They're not used to stillness. And the more still you are, the louder their conscience becomes. The more control they thought they had begins to unravel. So stop over-explaining. Stop defending. Stop narrating your boundaries for people who have no intention of honoring them. Let your stillness speak for itself. Because once you stop giving people the emotional fuel they depend on, they're forced to power themselves. And most of them can't. Most emotional chaos doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from who's controlling the frame of what's happening. Because the one who controls the frame controls the story, and the one who controls the story controls the outcome. Think about it. When someone acts cold and distant, and you instantly start asking, "What did I do wrong?" Guess what just happened? You gave them control of the narrative. When someone criticizes you in public and you jump to defend yourself, you've just accepted their frame, that you're guilty until proven otherwise. When someone rolls their eyes, shrugs you off, or pulls away emotionally, and you start chasing, proving, fixing, you're not just reacting, you're surrendering your ground. That's what most people never realize. The loudest person doesn't win. The calmest one does. The person who holds their frame, who doesn't flinch, doesn't bite the bait, doesn't rush to defend their worth, forces the other person to either rise to their level or collapse under their own weight. This is Stoicism in real time. Not a theory, a test. And the question is simple. Can you hold your ground when someone's trying to make you feel small? Can you stay centered when someone's trying to make you explain yourself? Can you stay still while someone else spins? Because the second you react emotionally, they've reframed the situation. You're no longer the man who sees clearly. You're the man who's triggered, who's emotional, who's unstable. And now, they've won not just the moment, but the perception. But when you don't engage, when you hold your frame, everything flips. Now they look like the one grasping for power. Now they're the one who can't stay composed. Now they're the one performing while you observe, grounded, unshaken. That's real power, not control over others, but control over the space between stimulus and response. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." He wasn't being dismissive. He was reminding himself, I decide what this means. And that's the ultimate power, the ability to decide what a moment means, instead of letting someone else assign meaning to it for you. So next time someone tries to make you feel insecure, insignificant, or invisible, pause, ask yourself, what story are they trying to pull me into? And then ask, do I want to live in that story? Because you don't have to. You can choose your own. And that choice is everything. Most people spend their lives being framed. The Stoic. He writes his own frame and lives inside it. And when you do that long enough, something strange happens. People stop trying to mess with you, not because they suddenly like you, but because they realize they can't reach you. And that distance you create by holding your frame, that's when they start to test your expectations. And if you're not ready, you'll fall back into old traps. Because the real enemy isn't what they do, it's what you expect. Most of the pain you feel, the anger, the frustration, the betrayal, it's not because of what someone did. It's because of what you expected them to do instead. You expected her to be loyal. You expected your friend to support you like you supported them. You expected your boss to appreciate your work. You expected the world to give back what you gave out. And when it didn't, you felt like something was wrong, like justice had been broken, like you were somehow violated. But here's the truth. No one broke anything, except the imaginary contract you wrote in your head. Let me say that again, because if you don't get this, you'll stay emotionally enslaved forever. You wrote the contract, then punish them for not signing it. That expectation you had, they never agreed to it. You just assumed. You projected. You believed that because you show up on time, others should too. Because you stay loyal, others should too. Because you communicate directly, others should too. And when they don't, you call it disrespect, but really, it's misalignment. You're expecting lions from sheep, loyalty from opportunists, clarity from the emotionally unavailable. And the gap between what you expected and what they actually are, that's where your suffering lives. But here's where the Stoic flips everything. Aurelius didn't say, don't trust anyone. He said, be prepared for anything. He woke up each day and reminded himself, today, I will meet people who are selfish, ignorant, dishonest. Not because he was cynical, but because he was realistic. And that realism protected his peace. Because if you expect the world to be chaotic, it won't shock you. If you expect people to be flawed, you won't feel betrayed every time they prove it. If you expect nothing, everything becomes easier to accept. This doesn't mean you become numb. It means you become unbreakable. You're no longer walking through life like an emotional gambler, placing bets on how others will treat you. You walk in already knowing whatever they do is a reflection of them, not a test of me. And the moment you drop the illusion that people owe you certain behaviors, you set yourself free. Think about it. You won't be angry she didn't call, because she never promised she would. You won't be upset your coworker threw you under the bus, because you no longer expect integrity from someone who's proven otherwise. You won't spiral when people ghost you, test you, or forget you, because your peace was never built on their consistency. That's power. Because now, you no longer react to who they are. You simply observe. You adjust. You step back, not to punish, but to protect. Because now, you've stopped being angry at the fire for being hot. You've simply stopped touching it. And the less you expect, the more you control. But even when you've dropped your expectations, the emotion still comes. It still rises. And if you're not ready, you'll confuse the feeling with the truth. That's why the next part matters. Learning how to watch emotion like a passing storm. You've been taught to trust your feelings. You feel it, so it must be real. She made you angry, so she must be wrong. He hurt your feelings, so he must be guilty. But here's the part no one teaches you. Not every feeling is the truth, and not every emotion deserves obedience. Because emotions are not permanent, they're not your identity. They're not facts. They're just weather. They come. They rise, they roar, and then they pass. But most people, they act at the peak of the storm. They reply to the message in anger. They scream back. They quit. They hit send. They burn the bridge. And by the time the wave is gone, the damage is already done. But what if you didn't have to ride every emotional current? What if you could step back and watch the wave without becoming it? That's what the Stoics trained for. They didn't suppress emotion, they separated from it. They practiced something powerful, non-identification. They didn't say, "I am angry." They said, "Anger is present." That subtle shift, it changes everything. Because now, instead of seeing through the eyes of anger, you're watching anger from a higher level. You're not inside the fire, you're observing it from the mountaintop. And in that space lies freedom. You begin to realize just because you feel disrespected doesn't mean you were. Just because you feel abandoned doesn't mean you're unworthy. Just because you feel rage doesn't mean someone else needs to suffer. You learn to sit with it, not act, not react. Just sit. Let the emotion rise. Let it shake. Let it scream. Let it crash. But you don't move because you know the truth. No storm lasts forever, and no emotion, no matter how loud, has the power to define you unless you let it. This is where real strength is born, not in avoidance, not in suppression, but in observation without absorption. You stop being the anger, you become the witness, and that witness never loses control. So the next time something rises, shame, jealousy, rage, sadness, don't flinch. Say to yourself, "This is a wave. I am the ocean. It will pass." And while others panic inside their own tide, you become the man who doesn't drown, not because the water isn't real, but because you finally remembered. You can float. That's what makes people stare. That's what makes them confused. Because while everyone else reacts, you remain calm, And that calm, it's not passive, it's power. But all the calm in the world means nothing if you still let other people dictate the current, because no matter how clear you become, if you don't learn how to block their chaos from entering, you'll still drown in storms that were never yours. Most people are emotionally exhausted not because of what they feel, but because of what they unknowingly absorb. You wake up feeling okay, then you get a text that's a little off, a short reply, no emoji, no warmth. You start wondering, did I do something? Then you go to work, and your boss is unusually cold. Your coworker sighs louder than usual. Someone on social media posts a jab that may or may not be about you. Suddenly, your chest is tight, your thoughts are racing, and you're no longer living in your own emotional world. You're reacting to everyone else's. That's the trap. You think you're being sensitive. You think you're being emotionally aware. But what you're really doing is letting other people install their moods into your nervous system. And now, you're carrying storms that were never yours to begin with. This is what the Stoics warned us about. Don't let what's outside pollute what's inside. And yet, that's exactly what most people do. They take someone's bad day personally. They see someone's silence as rejection. They interpret someone else's coldness as a reflection of their own worth. But here's the truth. No one tells you. Most of the time, their energy has nothing to do with you. Their tone, their delay, their microaggressions, that's their battle. That's their trauma. That's their unhealed part lashing out. And if you absorb it, you become collateral damage in a war that was never yours to fight. So how do you stop absorbing? You build an emotional boundary, not just with people, but with energy. That means the next time someone's off, you say to yourself, this is theirs. The next time someone projects, blames, or tries to provoke, you remind yourself, I don't need to match this frequency. You don't mirror chaos. You anchor yourself in clarity. You observe it, you acknowledge it, but you don't internalize it. Because here's what happens when you stop absorbing. You gain energy, you gain clarity, you stop overthinking things that were never yours to solve. You stop apologizing for moods you didn't cause. You stop adjusting yourself to fix people who refuse to fix themselves. And in that clarity, you realize people are allowed to feel how they feel, and you're allowed to not take it on. Epictetus said it best. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them. Modernize that. It's not their energy that drains you. It's your belief that you have to respond to it. You don't, you never did. The moment you draw that line, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, is the moment you reclaim the space to feel what's actually yours. And that's where peace lives. Not in controlling everyone else, but in refusing to carry what doesn't belong to you. And when you finally stop absorbing other people's chaos, one last shift remains. Turning your emotional strength into a system, a mindset you train every single day. Not just when life gets hard, but so when it does, you're already unshakable. Every man thinks he'll rise when life tests him. But the truth is, no one rises to the occasion. You fall to your level of preparation. That's why you don't stay calm when someone disrespects you. That's why you fire off the message you regret. That's why you lose control, even though you promised yourself you wouldn't. Because you didn't train, you didn't rehearse, you didn't condition your mind to meet the moment, so the moment swallowed you whole. But that changes now. Because if you want to become the kind of man who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't break under stress, who doesn't get emotionally hijacked by small minds and loud mouths, you need to train for it. And the training, it starts every morning, before the world tries to tell you who to be. Here's how. 5 minutes. That's all it takes. 5 minutes of focused psychological preparation, not meditation, not motivation, but a Stoic protocol, rewiring your emotional core so that when the storm comes, you're already still. Minute 1. Sit, breathe, and remind yourself, I am not my emotions. I am the observer. You let the mind settle, not by forcing silence, but by creating space. 1 deep breath in, hold, release. Let your nervous system register that you're not in danger, that no matter what happens today, you decide your internal state. Minute 2, write this sentence. Today, I will not give my peace away cheaply. And when you write it, feel it, imagine someone pushing your buttons, and imagine yourself smiling, not because you're passive, but because you're in control. Minute 3, visualize the trigger, that person who tests you. That situation that normally rattles you, picture it, hear it, then picture your response. Calm, grounded, unreadable. This is mental training. Your brain doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So rehearse clarity, and clarity becomes your reflex. Minute 4. Ask the question, what's in my control today? Write one thing, then write one thing that's not. This resets your focus. You no longer waste energy chasing what's outside your influence. You redirect everything toward what's yours to command. Minute 5. Say this sentence out loud. I am still. The world is loud, but I decide what enters. Say it twice, not to believe it, to become it. That's it. 5 minutes. And no, it won't fix everything in a day. But do it for 7 days straight, and you'll notice something powerful. You won't react as fast. You'll pause more often. You'll walk into chaos and walk out untouched. Because you've stopped waiting for the world to be calm, you've become the calm in the world. And once you train like this every morning, the real shift happens. You stop needing the world to change because you've already changed how you meet the world. Now you understand something most people will never realize in their lifetime, that your real strength isn't measured by how hard you hit, but by how still you remain when everything tries to shake you. That your real freedom isn't about cutting people off or walking away loud. It's about walking through storms without letting them stain your mind. You've seen the game for what it is. You've seen how people bait you, not to talk, but to trap, not to listen, but to twist, not to care, but to calculate. And the second you engage without thinking, they've won. Not because they're smarter, not because they're stronger, but because they got what they wanted, your emotional access. But that was the old you. The new you doesn't bite the bait. He sees the test, and instead of reacting, he watches, he waits. He observed the pattern, the tone, the manipulation, and then he says nothing. Not because he's powerless, but because he's focused. Because silence is no longer discomfort, it's discipline. Because he knows that every time he reacts to noise, he lowers his signal. Every time he explains himself to people who don't even understand themselves, he bleeds energy. And every time he tries to prove his worth to someone committed to misunderstanding him, He steps out of alignment with his own power, so he stops. He doesn't need to be loud anymore. He doesn't need to fix every misunderstanding, fight every disrespect, or chase every ounce of closure. He chooses peace, not because it's easy, but because it's rare. Because in a world where everyone reacts to everything, the man who chooses stillness becomes a mystery. And in that mystery, people feel something they can't explain. They feel his clarity. They feel his center. They feel that even if they try to rattle him, he will not collapse. And that feeling, it earns more respect than any clever comeback ever could. This is Stoicism in its purest form. Not abstract theory, but embodied mastery. Not the absence of emotion, but the command of it. You've walked through every lesson now. How to shift your perspective before anger takes root. How to respond without surrendering control. How to drop expectations that only exist in your mind. How to ride emotional waves instead of drowning in them. How to separate what belongs to you from what doesn't. How to train your mind every morning to meet the world from a place of command. And now, how to live every day as a man who no longer moves on impulse, but from intention. And here's what will happen next. People will notice. They'll test you more at first. They'll try harder to get a reaction. But when you don't give them what they're used to, when you don't flinch, defend, chase, or explain, they'll shift. Some will pull away, not because you did anything wrong, but because they no longer feel powerful around you. Others will lean in, because your silence has become magnetic. And the best ones, they'll rise with you. They'll meet your stillness with their own. They'll grow in your presence because they're not here to steal your peace, but to protect it with you. And that's when you'll know. You didn't just change your reactions. You changed your relationships. You changed your role in a room. You changed the energy you attract, not by becoming louder, faster, or harder, but by becoming still. So here's your next step. Don't just nod and move on. Make this real. Start your 5-minute training tomorrow. Write the sentence. Visualize the trigger. Watch the wave. Hold the frame. Reclaim the energy you've been bleeding into the wrong people. And most of all, remember this. You weren't born to react. You were built to command. You were trained by pain. And now, you move from power. If this message landed, subscribe. Not for me, for you. So that every time the world gets louder, you have a reminder. Your silence is not weakness, it's strategy.